Chapter 1. The Last Winter Pastures. Snow fell without sound upon the upper ridges of the forest. Each flake spun downward like ash from some forgotten fire, slow and undecided, layering the world in a quiet that neither bird nor wind dared disturb. Beneath the pale weight of sky and season moved a solitary figure. Broad, low to the earth, his steps labored, leaving prints deep in the fresh whiteness. Arlo walked. His coat, once brilliant and thick with youth's confidence, had faded into a matte tapestry of age, sand and soot matted with time. His fur held the scent of pine and wind, and behind his hind legs it curled softly like the memory of a spring river. His ears drooped, wool-heavy and alert. His black nose, scarred near its base from an old battle beneath the sheep pens, twitched gently with every frozen current. The world around him was a museum of silence. The shepherds had long since left. The flocks were gone. The barn's bones now leaned crooked against the snowdrifts, rafters broken like ribs of something that had once breathed and now lay still. Yet Arlo remained. He remembered. He remembered the taste of rain on sheepskin, the smell of warm wool clustered under moonlight. He remembered running, not walking, across green pastures that now slumbered under white sheets. He remembered his master's hand, rough and kind, the way it landed with certainty between his shoulders. He remembered the low whistle that meant come, the clap that meant stay, and the occasional laugh that meant nothing and everything. Now there was no whistle, only wind. The old Anatolian trudged along the slope's edge, following the boundary once marked by posts and lines and the scent of sheep's fear. That scent was gone now, faded like summer, but Arlo followed memory's path. Where once lambs had panicked at his approach, now there were only trees and the crushed ghosts of last year's leaves beneath the snow. Above him, the pine forest thickened. Shadows gathered there, long and unmoving, like sentries that had grown tired of their watch. Arlo paused beneath one such tree. Its limbs stooped low with snow. The air was still. In that moment, he closed his eyes. In darkness, his mind swam backward. He saw the wolf, not in flesh but in memory, lean and white-fanged, slipping through the mist, eyes burning like coals. He remembered the sprint, the roar in his own chest, the snap of bone. He had bled for his flock. Once. More than once. He bore the cause still in his hip, where every step now ground against old pain. When he opened his eyes, the pine grove had not moved, but something in the air had changed. The quiet was heavier now, as if the forest had drawn a breath and refused to release it. Snow kept falling. He walked again. By twilight, Arlo reached the high meadow. It was empty. Once, hundreds of sheep had gathered here in twilight's hush, breathing steam into the dusk. Arlo had stood among them like a mountain, unmoving, watching, guarding. Now, he stood alone in the center of that forgotten field. His paws sank into the white. His breath came as slow clouds. He lowered himself into the snow. It was cold, but not unkind. The sky above bled from gray to iron. Stars would come soon, and with them, the long song of the forest, the cracking of ice, the whisper of trees, the distant shifting of unseen life. Arlo closed his eyes again. Sleep came, not as escape, but as remembering. He was running. The fields were green. The sheep were alive. His master stood beneath the sun, whistling a tune Arlo had never forgotten. The snow fell. The world held its breath. Chapter 2. Hollow Hills. Echoes of steps. The days passed as drifting smoke, unmeasured and quiet, dissolving into one another beneath the gray dome of winter sky. Arlo moved deeper into the hills, drawn by something neither hunger nor instinct could explain. Perhaps it was only habit, perhaps memory, or perhaps the faint pull of something that lived in the bones of all wanderers. He no longer searched for shelter. He searched for meaning. The path he followed had long been erased by time. What remained was suggestion, a curvature in the slope, a space where the snow lay thinner, disturbed by buried stones and ancient roots. He followed it as he once had, nose low to the ground, eyes narrowing against the bright reflection of midday frost. He came upon the place on the third day. It had been a pasture once, high and open, where sheep were herded in early spring to graze on a first blush of green. Now it was a pale basin of silence, ringed by weathered stone and stiff, leafless shrubs. The air here was colder, heavier. The snow was marked by no tracks, but his own. Arlo stood at the center and listened, not to sound, but to silence. There was a kind of echo here, not of noise, but of presence. Something old lingered in the soil, something that had watched generations pass. Arlo turned in slow circles, his breath curling like incense in the still air. He sniffed the wind. Nothing fresh. But beneath the crust of ice, the ground remembered. He could smell it faintly now. Hooves, wool, sweat, fear. He moved toward the stone wall at the pasture's edge. Moss clung to it in frozen sheets. Arlo pressed his nose to crevices, then licked at a small indentation. A hollow one shaped by habit, by routine. A place where sheep had rubbed against a stone. He sat there for a long while, tail curled tight against his side. Then he lay down, as he had done years ago. The sun dipped low, burning orange through the bare branches of the hill's crown. A wind rose, rattling the brush. Arlo's ears twitched, then stilled. He did not sleep. Sleep came rarely now, and when it did, it brought dreams that carried him backward. That night, the sky cleared fully. Stars swarmed the heavens in silent vigil. Arlo rose and walked again. He descended into a hollow where the stream once flowed, though now it was a frozen ribbon beneath bark and stone. He stopped where a shepherd's fire had once burned. The ashes were long gone, but Arlo sniffed the earth and found warmth that no frost could erase. A memory clung there, of laughter, of a lamb's cry, of a wolf's sudden howl. He did not howl back. Instead, he sat beneath a leaning birch, its bark peeled like old paper, and waited. The night grew colder. At dawn, frost crusted his whiskers. He rose slowly, every joint heavy, and continued onward. The trees thickened. The shadows grew longer. But Arlo kept walking. Something waited ahead. And whatever it was, he would find it, even if only memory remained. Chapter 3. The Scent of Fire and Furrows. The morning broke with muted light. Not sunlight, but the dull gleam of overcast skies that hung low like a sagging roof. Arlo trod carefully now through unfamiliar woods. The trees narrowing and growing close. The ground uneven with gnarled roots beneath a thin crust of ice. He had wandered far from the pasture lands of his youth. The air was different here, damp, filled with the scent of rot, of slow decay, and something else. Smoke. It was faint, barely more than a wisp in the wind. But Arlo's nose flared. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant life, or its memory. With ears perked and steps steadier than they had been in days. He followed the scent. He moved like a shadow through the trees, each movement precise. Snow clung to his fur, and his breath fogged in the brittle air. After an hour's quiet tracking, he crested a small rise and saw it. Ruins. What had once been a homestead now lay scattered beneath the weight of years and neglect. The chimney still stood, cracked and reaching into gray sky, and blackened stones marked the outline of a house long dead. The scent of smoke came not from fire, but from the wood itself. Charred timbers buried beneath snow, exhaling ghosts as the temperature warmed. Arlo approached with reverence. He moved slowly, nose close to the stones, reading the ground like scripture. Here had been food. There warmth. He paused near the fireplace, now a husk of black rock, and lowered himself to the ground. He could still smell them, children, chickens, wool. The memories clung to the ash. He circled once before lying down, tail tucked. There was no shelter here, but it was not shelter he sought. It was presence, the residue of life. All day he remained there, unmoving save for his twitching ears. The wind picked up and snow began to fall again, soft and slow. He let it coat him, let it bury him like dust upon forgotten shelves. By dusk, he rose and padded around the ruins. He found an old trough under a collapsed awning. The wood was splintered but dry. He gnawed it softly, not for nourishment, but to remember the feel of it in his mouth. He closed his eyes briefly. The snow fell heavier. That night, he did not walk. He lay among the ruins and dreamed of furrows being turned, of lambs being born, of a bell's ring in the high grasses. He dreamed of a shepherd, face obscured, hands worn, voice humming something without tune. He dreamed of the fire, And when he woke, the snow was deeper, and the scent of memory had faded a little more. Still he stood. Still he walked on, towards something that might no longer be there, but might still remember him. Chapter 4, where the river broke. The hills began to drop away in slow folds, and Arlo's steps followed the pull of gravity, descending into a narrow valley veined with ice and scattered stone. A frozen river split the earth here, one swift and gleaming, now a jagged tongue of frost pressed deep into its channel. The trees grew thinner, more sparse, and the wind had more room to run. He walked beside the river, his pads cracking the crust of ice that had grown atop the banks. Beneath, the current murmured faintly, locked away under a cage of cold. It was here that the scent of wolves returned. Not fresh, but sharp, marking. A warning. Arlo paused, if for bristling in patches. He sniffed, then turned in a slow circle, ears trained. The snow revealed no clear tracks. Whatever had passed through had done so days ago. He moved on, the way the river pointed. As he walked, the wind shifted. It carried not just the scent of beasts, but of iron, oil, and dust, man scent, the smell of rails and rust. Civilization, faint and distant, but undeniable. By dusk, he reached the remnants of a wooden bridge. It had collapsed into the river gorge, the planks shattered and scattered like a broken jaw. He looked down at the frozen water below. It was passable, dangerous, but passable. He descended, slow and steady. The wind bit at his joints. He stepped onto the river with the care of a ghost, his weight evenly spread. The ice creaked, but held. At the midpoint, he paused. The sun, bleeding red against the far ridges, lit a silhouette like a monument. He crossed. On the other side, the land rose into sharp, steep ridges. He climbed, panting with effort. At the top, he paused and looked back. Across the white plain, his path lay etched, temporary as all things. And then he heard it. A bell, not from a collar, not from memory. Real, high, faint, and distant. He turned toward the sound and ran. Old bones, frozen lungs, aching heart, all forgotten in the sprint. The bell called again, and Arlo answered, into the dark, into the 5th chapter waiting, where memory might give way to truth, and the shepherd might still be listening. Chapter 5, the final bell. Arlo ran until his lungs burned, his breath tearing from him in ragged bursts that turned to mist in the deepening cold. The bell echoed again, faint but steady, like a tether in the dark. It was not imagination. It was not memory. It was a sound carried by air, by time, by some unseen hand pulling him forward. The ground beneath his paws turned rough and broken. Roots jutted from the soil like twisted bones, and patches of bare earth peeked through the snow where sunlight had touched them days before. He slipped once, righted himself, and kept running. His joints screamed. His vision blurred. But the bell rang again, and so he moved. The forest thinned, then vanished. Arlo broke through the tree line into a clearing he had never seen. And yet he knew it. It was not a village. It was not a farm. It was a place between those things, nestled in the crook of the hills, cradled like a secret. The buildings were small, worn by time and weather, but intact. Smoke rose from chimneys. Lanterns hung from poles. The sound of the bell came not from metal or rope, but from wind chimes strung across a wooden frame near a cottage door. He stopped at the edge of the clearing. The snow around him was untouched. He stood still, chest heaving, his breath forming clouds that drifted into the twilight. No one emerged. No voices called, but the air shimmered with presence. He moved forward, step by step. As he entered the settlement, memories flared behind his eyes. Memories that were not his alone. Generations of dogs, shepherds, flocks. A lineage of guardians. This place had been built for such things, preserved like a page torn from a forgotten book. It had waited, as if expecting his return. At the center of the clearing, he stopped. There, rising from the snow, was a stone marker, rough, hand-carved. Etched upon it, just a single name, Arlo. He sniffed at it, licked the edge, sat beside it. A warm wind blew through the chimes again, and the sound filled the air, not just with music, but with peace. He lay down, and this time it was not from weariness. It was from a rival. Above him, the stars blinked into view one by one, shy and cold. The snow began to fall again, but softer now, as if in reverence. And in that final hour, Arlo closed his eyes. Not in sleep, not in death, but in fulfillment. The long walk was over. The bell had rung, and he was home,